just a member of the Nation of Islam because of the love and joy she witnessed in you at the age of 12. Can you share more with us about that time?
Oh, yes, sir. Before my mother became a registered Muslim of the Nation of Islam, she was supportive of my father taking me to Saturday school, which I mentioned in that clip, where I began to learn about the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And eventually, she became interested herself. She would attend the mosque meeting on Sundays with my father and I. And then eventually, one day, she decided that she did not want me to go to junior MGT class alone. So she decided to come and she participated in the orientation class. And as she was going through her processing, we would study together as she was working on her letter and explaining to me some of the things that she was learning from her orientation teacher back in New York City. Her name, I remember her orientation teacher name very well. Her name was Sister Shala. And my mom and I would just practice together. She would work on her letter, but I was beginning to recite the lessons and beginning to learn about how to care for myself and beginning to learn the importance of eating properly and following the dietary law given and how to eat to live, and learning about the bean soup and learning about my virtue. And my mother was very excited about my desire to attend class, that it inspired her to attend as well. And it was a journey that we went through together.
That's a very beautiful story and a very beautiful testimony. I'm glad that you shared that with us. And we'll move on to this next question. There's a misinformed segment of the population that believes that Islam oppresses women. And unfortunately, there are some Muslim communities that they actually limit the rights and advances of women. But here you are as a member of the Nation of Islam. You hold a doctoral degree. So for our viewing audience, can you talk about how the Nation of Islam encourages women to develop themselves and condemns any effort to restrict the righteous aspirations of women?
Sure. I would like to begin by lifting up some words from Sister Minister Dr. Ava, which is written in the Nation of Islam's Provisional Constitution on page 3. It reads, "It is the duty of the Muslim to acquire knowledge, and natural law mandates that the man or woman who refuses to study becomes a detriment to freedom, justice, and equality for us all. Minister Farrakhan has taught us ever so carefully that the root of man's sin is polytheism, and for that reason, he or she who deliberately rejects knowledge, is a mortal enemy of the Nation of Islam." And I lift that statement up, the words of Sister Minister Dr. Ava Muhammad, to justify that as women, we are told to seek our God-given talents. And we are supported in that endeavor. And I am a representation of that support. I feel that my success is because I am a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And if it wasn't for this teaching, which is the foundation to my life and undergirds everything that I do, I would not have been able to achieve receiving a doctorate in the area of English.
Wow. And so thank you. And thank you for sharing that. And I pray that those who have the opportunity to see this interview also, that your response helps them to realize that they shouldn't lump the Nation of Islam in that group as some of those with this misunderstanding about the value of the woman. Now, you're an educator and you have had the experience of working in our Muhammad University of Islam in Chicago. One of our previous guests, who's Dr. Boyce Watkins, he shared with us how blown away he was with the students at the MUI. He was talking about their creativity, their intelligence, their level of questioning. What has been some of the amazing experiences you have had while working at the MUI?
Well, I would like to begin by saying working at Muhammad University was one of the best teaching and professional development opportunities of my life. And there's so much that I enjoy, but one thing that I did enjoy was the students' desire to learn and the students' desire to become masters at whatever was presented to them. I also enjoyed seeing them have righteous competition on who could do better as it relates to some of the assignments that I may have given. I also enjoyed how the day began with Islamic studies. So they were affirmed in who they are before they began to participate in the classes that speak to the subject matters that they needed to learn. I was the high school English teacher, so it was just a blessing to see the students learn more about themselves, gain the discipline and the confidence that they needed to move through different subject matters and not be defeated, and to also reflect the respect for each other, and also to reflect the discipline that the teachings gives us all.
And I'm an educator as well and work in the high school system, and I know how good it must feel to be able to have students who have a desire to learn. Because one of the things with my students, I was telling them last week, like some of them feel if there's not a grade, I don't need to do the work. And I was telling them when you have that spirit, you missed out on the importance of the process of learning. And
Yes,
so we're going to transition to this question I want to ask you, because our sister, who's from Mosque number 15, she's the regional student MGT captain. You know, she contacted me and she suggested that I have you on as a guest. You know, and I know that there are many sisters from watching your numerous interviews that you talk about who have had a positive impact on your life. But can you share with us before we go into our break the impact that our sister Nusaba, right, has had on your life?
yes, sir. I just would like to acknowledge that I met Sister Nusaba when
Nusaba.
I was a fresh woman in college. I think it was either my freshman year or my sophomore year in college. And at that moment in meeting her, I was truly inspired by her military posture, her love for the nation, and her love for the sisterhood. And reflecting upon our journey together, you know, and also looking up what Nusaiba means. I just wanted to lift that as it relates to my commentary, that Nusaiba was someone who converted in the early days of Islam. She traveled with a group of men from Medina to Mecca to join the community of Muslims with the Prophet, peace be upon him. Nusaiba was by far the most distinguished of women because of her many superior qualities, especially because of her bravery she demonstrated in defense of the Prophet during the Battle of Uhud. And when I saw that, it just encapsulates, in my humble opinion, who Sister Nusaiba is. And after meeting her, we kept in touch. We were kind of like pen pals. And then Allah blessed me at some point to move to Atlanta to pursue my PhD at Georgia State University. And when she found that out, she was elated and very supportive, to connect back to your other question, of my journey of pursuing my PhD. And while also juggling the responsibilities of the pursuit of that degree, I did participate in various events and attend mosque meetings when I could. And I would say that she added another layer to my training and my knowledge in the area of security. And what I really appreciate about her is that not only is she one that's going to push you out of your comfort zone, but she's also going to offer affirmation, and she's also going to offer support, because her vision for you, she can see the God-given talents in you, and she's happy to help you achieve that. And that is what I experienced in the area of security, as well as the reason for which I moved to Atlanta.
That's amazing. You know, as you read that history about help me pronounce the name,
Saber.
Nusaiba, as you read that about the sister who was there during the time of the prophet, it just, if I didn't know about that, and if I only knew our sister in Atlanta, that is her. You
Yes, sir.
know, that is her. And even as it relates to her love for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, for our nation, and even her service. Is there anything else you want to add about her before we go into our next break?
I just would like to thank her for recommending me to have this interview on this platform. And I just want to say that I pray that Allah will continue to bless her tenfold for all the hard work that she's doing on behalf of the women in the Nation of Islam, particularly in the southern region, and all that she does to make sure that our minister is safe and secure, and her representation of the women of the Nation of Islam.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we can't wait to our sister who's watching. Your invitation is still on board, so you know. So for those who are watching, we thank you all for tuning in. We're here with our sister, Dr. Khalilah T. Muhammad, and she's given a wonderful testimony, and I can't wait to hear her responses to the other questions. But for those who are watching, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and make sure you stay tuned in, as we'll be back. We'll be back, inshallah, after these brief messages from our sponsors.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Now you can get the same uncompromising truth you've come to expect from the Final Call newspaper on all your connected devices. Subscribe to the Final Call digital edition today. Go to subscribe.finalcalldigital.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Minister Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
And we're back, brothers and sisters, to continue this interview with our guest, Dr. Khalilah T. Muhammad. And so I want to begin this segment by asking you about your participation in the board for the MGT and GCC Vanguard. You spoke about in some of the interviews that I've watched about how you were shocked when informed, and you felt a little intimidated because you were one of the youngest on the board at that time. So my question to you is, how did you find your footing and your voice among such great women in our nation who were part of that board, such as the Mothers of the Faithful and the former, some of the former national MGT cabinets, and many more?
Oh, yes, sir. Just one minor correction. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a board for the Vanguard. It was a board for the MGT and GCC class, period.
Gotcha.
And I, myself, and Sister Amina, we were the representatives that were in the Vanguard class at that time. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, one time the minister came to address us, and he was addressing us with regards to a project that he had put us on. And as he was speaking, part of his discussion was, and to the youngest members of the board, it is your responsibility to make sure that your voice is heard at this table. And he went on speaking. And so I'm sitting there, she and I are sitting there together. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, that's me. So as a result of hearing that instruction, we hear and we obey, right? And I did not want to disappoint him because there was a transcript of each meeting. And I did not want to not hear and obey his instruction of making sure that from that point on, my voice was heard. So although I was a little shy and intimidated as I sat at the table with the Mothers of the Faithful and some of the other pillars of our nation. I challenged myself to allow my voice to be heard. And I challenged myself to also ask questions because I did not want him to come back. And I did not follow that instruction.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. And we'll go to this next question. This is a two-part question.
Yes, sir.
You've been blessed to have several interactions with Mother Khadijah Farrakhan, our mother. And I would like to ask you a two-part question regarding what you have learned from her. The first one is, what have you learned from just observing her, observing the actions of Mother Khadijah with her husband, with her children, with believers and others, just from what you've seen?
Well, I just would like to say that, in having the blessing of being in her company and having the blessing of having interactions with her, I would say that many of those interactions did not include long, drawn-out conversations, but they included small conversations, pleasant conversations that also were peppered by gestures. Whether she winked at me, whether she offered a hug, whether she asked me, "Does my necklace look okay?" Those are some of my takeaways in my interaction with Mother Khadijah, along with her invitation for me to sit by her. So I think in terms of observing her, everything that I just explained is always rooted in love. I think that Mother Khadijah exudes civilization. I think that Mother Khadijah exudes dignity. I think that she reflects the highest of beauty. And I think that she's an embodiment of grace and discernment.
Beautiful. Wow. That was poetic in a sense. How you were just saying that. And so now, and I know you talked about from what you observed, and if you can, were there any lessons or jewels you may have learned from conversations that you have had, or just maybe stuff she may have shared with groups of sisters and you happen to be present?
Yes, sir. I learned some of the things that she likes to do outside of what we know. Like I learned that she loves to dance. I also learned from her expression and watching her interact with her family. I learned what love truly is. I've learned patience. I've learned kindness. I've learned from her, as I've heard her say, to keep your duty to Allah and to practice Islam as taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Deepen your relationship with the teachings and with Allah. I've also learned that a wife must support and stand by her husband, but it's also important to know when to be visible versus when not to be. Those are my takeaways from Mother Khadijah. I'm sure there's so much more, but those are the ones that I can think of at this time.
And those were very powerful. I think about, and the reason why I asked you those questions, because I remember the Final Call newspaper ran, it was maybe a 2-question interview that they had with Mother Khadijah.
Yes, sir.
And her responses, that they asked her, I think, about being a wife, and I think they asked her about children. And her responses were very short, but profound.
Yes,
right?
Sir.
Profound.
Yes, sir.
And just like it bears witness to that, just like what you just shared, and it gives others who are watching that we all can learn more about this great woman in our midst. And so we'll get to this question. In the article, in the Final Call newspaper, you stated the following. We're going to talk about somebody that we know that you also love, Toni Morrison, right?
Yes, sir.
Quote, you said, "After Almighty God Allah, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, my parents and my godmother, as well as my Nana," right?
Yes, sir.
"Then there was Toni Morrison," end of quote. So my question to you is, when did your interest and admiration for her writing become such a great interest to you?
Oh, yes, sir. Well, I first, I guess, met her acquaintance through her literature when I was an undergrad. And at that time, I glossed over it. It she didn't resonate with me then. I guess I needed a little more maturity. And then when I was in graduate school, working on my master's, we read her novel, Beloved. And as a result of reading that novel, which is a fictional iteration that addresses slavery and the impact of slavery, as a result of reading that, it felt like home, because her love for Black people, her wisdom, her boldness, is something that reminded me of my upbringing as a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And as a result of being able to make that connection, I knew that in pursuit of my PhD, that she was the author that I was going to study. So, Toni Morrison, one phrase that she made in one of the videos that is from BBC News, the British interviewer asked her, why don't you have a lot of Caucasian characters in your books? And she said, because I'm not Caucasian. And she said, and my father told me not to trust white people.
Wow.
So I write from a place that I know, which is to be Black.
Wow. That's
and when she said that, I'm thinking of who is the original man and who is a Caucasian man. It just right away connected to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I wanted to study someone that was connected to my belief and connected to my history. They say dissertations are autobiographical. So you learn a lot about what a person cares about, is interested in, is committed to when you read their works, because we spend time studying that particular author or history or time period or mathematical problem or whatever. We spend years gathering research, proposing. So Toni Morrison, immediately when I met her acquaintance through her novel, I knew that she was the safe place, but she was also the place where I would be challenged as a reader and as an educator and as a scholar.
Wow, beautiful. And in addition to that, is related to this, you've also had the opportunity of meeting her, right?
I have, yes,
Can you
sir.
talk about that before our break?
Sure. I was at one of the Toni Morrison Society's biennial conferences in Washington, D.C. And Professor Morrison always attends all of the conferences that the Toni Morrison Society holds. Well, she did when she was alive. But so for this particular conference in Washington, D.C., she was in attendance. And this was around the time that she had launched her children's books. And my mentor, being very much aware of me being a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and what that entails, she asked me to be the one to help escort Professor Morrison. So upon the arrival of Professor Morrison at a banquet that we had, I was able to give Professor Morrison a corsage. And she asked me if I was my mentor's graduate student. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I smiled. And I escorted her into the banquet to her seat. And she was there when I received an award on behalf of the society, which was a complete surprise to me. So it was, to study someone and to meet them is very profound. Oftentimes in my discipline, we're studying authors that are not alive. So at that time, Professor Morrison was alive, and I was very grateful to have the opportunity to meet her after being on the path of studying her works.
Wow, that's beautiful. And we're approaching our next break, but when we come back after the next break, I want to continue the conversation about literature, because literature it plays a significant role as well, and it is very powerful, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
So for those who are watching, make sure you stay tuned and make sure you're sharing this interview with other people, tagging other people, and make sure you're hitting the subscribe button as well. So we'll be right back after we hear from these brief announcements from our sponsors.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App, NNV News.
AsiaticMinds.com. online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. 2022 through 23 enrollment waiting list open now. Visit AsiaticMinds.com.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
And we're back, brothers and sisters. Thank you all for tuning in to hear more of our interview with our sister, Dr. Khalilah T. Muhammad. Now, we're talking about literature, which I know you love. I would like to ask you another question regarding that. And this is a two-part question as well. You know, from your expertise, how has literature been used to enslave the minds of the original people? And my other side of that question is, how can it also be used as a tool for the work of resurrection?
Well, I think the first part that comes to mind, and we've heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say, that the enemy always puts the truth in a book, right? So we as a people have to be willing to read, you know, and the enemy is really doing a job on us because, you know, we are enticed to deal with more stimulation as it relates to technology. So our ability to take a book off the shelf, you know, and read it and actively read it is something that's not as easy to come by. You know, we are, even with my students, as I teach at the college level, they want me to verbalize everything for them. They do not want to read the instruction. They do not want to print the instruction, but they want me to always give a summary of what my expectations are, or even do the work for them, you know. And I think that that's reflective of the enemy's job on us as it relates to technology. But we have to remember that truth can be found in the book. We just have to be willing to go on the journey to find the truth and epitomize the words that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave for the Swan Song. He said, I cannot live without the truth. So we have to have that type of zeal and that type of commitment to finding the truth, but also finding it by finding pleasure in reading. I'm also reminded, for the second part of your question, of the Holy Quran, which gives the commandment. Prophet Muhammad was given the commandment to read, Iqra, right? And it is through that act of reading that one can unlock the shackles, the dust, and the cobwebs that occupy our minds. You know, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, what he gives to us is so right and exact, because in point number 5 of what the Muslims believe, it states that we believe in the resurrection of the dead. not in a physical resurrection, but mental resurrection. We believe that the so-called Negroes are most in need of mental resurrection. Therefore, they will be resurrected first. Well, in order for that resurrection to come, we have to make sure that our people are finding joy and love in reading. You know, in teaching the orientation class, the MGT and GCC class here for orientation, one of the seminal texts of orientation across the world is Message to the Black Man.
Message to the Black
So
Man.
there's something to be said about restoring our love to read and also read literature, because it will unlock our minds, you know, which brings me back to why I like Toni Morrison, because she speaks about the importance of the reader being a participant, and that she's not one who provides answers, but it's the reader's responsibility to think, reflect, to wrestle with what it is that are historical truths that can be presented.
Ooh, sound like you have a book in you somewhere. I know it's coming.
Inshallah, yes, sir.
And it's interesting to hear you talk about some of those challenges that you have with some of the students there on the college level, because it's the same thing with some of the students on the high school level. And I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say that as long as you remain not a reader, you put yourself in a position of somebody else to mislead you when you're waiting on them to tell you what they read, because based upon the condition of their heart, they can tell you this is what's in the book. Right. And that's profound what you
and it's funny that you lifted that, because you know, some time ago Muhammad University of Islam had a conference, and the theme dealt with reading, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan spoke on the significance of reading. And you know, and one thing that comes to mind on just the importance of reading is, as Muslims, we are approaching the holy month of Ramadan. And we're approaching a time period coming up very quickly where we will have to read a part every day.
That's right.
Right? And we read the same book every day, every month, every year, different parts every year. But it's something to be said about the process of engaging with text and reading.
Definitely.
And the repetition of it. So.
And Allah says, read in the name of our Lord, the most generous. Like, he has something to give us, but we have to become readers. And so now, and thank you for that yet another profound response. So we're going to transition to ask some questions about your time with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. You know, you talked about how you were interviewed by the minister himself. And what I found interesting, you talked about how you could see his connection to Allah and his divinity by his questioning. You know, based upon what you can share, you know, can you elaborate on how you were able to see that?
Yes, sir. You know, I just want to, in acknowledging this moment, you know, I just want to express my gratitude for having the opportunity to have that moment with him. You know, I don't take it lightly, and I'm still reflective of that moment, as well as other moments when I've been blessed to be in his company. In this particular moment, he was asking me at that point that I'm thinking of some very personal questions as it related to my domestic affairs. And in the moment in which I was striving to answer the questions, but I was also being mindful that there were other people in the room. And I don't know if any of us have had that opportunity when you have an opportunity to speak with him, but in some instances, you're not by yourself. So you kind of have to really focus on him and Allah and strive to answer the questions as they come to you. And as he was asking me questions and I was answering them the best that I could, I was also receiving guidance from him, because in my response, it was bringing something out of him. So he was advising me and instructing me as I was answering questions, and his words were future guidance for me. And I'm grateful to say that in those moments where he asked me a question and I answered a question, and he asked me a question and then he gave me more guidance, I can think of moments in my life right now where what he said has absolutely come into fruition. And that's a bearing of witness in itself, that what he tells you about yourself and what he tells you that's to come, that you are able to witness it coming into fruition.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. That was very profound. And I got to gather myself together. We go get back to this next question.
Yes, sir.
Are you, as an educator, I'm an educator as well, and I talk about, now I've attended my share of professional development sessions. However, I've never attended a professional development session as an educator where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was invited to speak, but you have, and I don't know, you kind of shared a little bit. Can you talk about that, what that experience was like to have the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan conduct a professional development for the educators at MUI?
Well, first and foremost, it's definitely a buzz of excitement in the air. And it's peppered, of course, with nervousness as we prepare, for the Messiah in our midst to come and address us. So we all arrive really early, and we make sure that we're in seats and in place when he enters the room. And he immediately begins to teach. Everything he offers us is rooted in what Master Father Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, are giving to him. And then after he has given over what is in his heart and what they have guided him to offer to us, then he blesses us with an opportunity to ask questions. Now, I must tell you that I have always been too shy in these settings to ask questions. But I want to acknowledge that I have the notes to prove that I was there, and that Allah has blessed me to take very copious notes in these opportunities of when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has guided us. And I would like to say that truthfully, the notes that I was able to take in the time frame for which he came to offer us a professional development are still lessons that I'm extracting from. If I may share an example, there was one lesson where he brought his violin teacher to our professional development. And there's a segment of this included in Closing the Gap where he speaks about the student-teacher relationship. But from this session, one aspect that really resonated with me, it was so much, but in trying to bring to life the lessons that he gives us, one aspect that I strove to work on was when he talked about being a complete teacher. And he said that you should not just be concerned with teaching the subject matter to your students, but you also should be concerned about manners, discipline, and etc. And I recall him also saying that it is important for a teacher to be happy so that we can be effective in our role. And he spoke about the importance of having a relationship, whether you were single or married, with Allah, so that you could be properly guided in this particular task that you have and gift that you're given over as a teacher. So that would be the example that I would like to share with regards to being in the presence of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and receiving professional development from him.
And that's a very profound. Wow, that's professional development on a whole entire level, right? Oh my goodness. Sir. So let me get to this question. The intent of this show is to provide opportunities for people to share powerful testimonies that they have about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, to help others get a better understanding of this man that we have in our midst and his value. Are there any amazing stories that you have heard or you have observed or you have personally experienced that shows the beautiful spirit of the minister that you can share with us?
Oh, yes, sir. I can think of one, I guess, brief example. If time allows, maybe I'll give another. But at one time, I was blessed with the opportunity to serve in his home for guests that he had. And after he had dinner with his guests, there was time for some entertainment. And so without any accompanying of music, piano, or anything like that, he had Dougie Fresh, and he had Joe the singer, R&B singer, present. And so both of them performed some of their favorite songs. And as they were performing, all of us that were in service for him and also his guests were able to mingle, a little bit and enjoy the music. So everybody was singing because Dougie Fresh sung his most popular song and Joe sung his most popular song. And, for the sisters in the room, we know what song that was. And as we were singing and enjoying the music, the minister's demeanor shifted.
Wow.
And he began to demonstrate some sensitivity, and his eyes welled up.
Wow.
And, all of us were waiting to hear, what it is that he was going to say. And of course, we're all wondering, did we do something wrong? Did we make him sad? And he expressed how moved he was to see how happy we were by this performance, this impromptu performance, and how much it made him feel to witness the joy and happiness on our face. And that particular example to me is one of many that I've witnessed that demonstrates his sensitivity and his love for his people, and how he's able to look so deeply into something by having the connection and the relationship with Master Father Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that he can see deeper into something that we would pass off as simple, and his desire for us to be free. So for him to even see us in a moment of joy, to go deeper than that, but to be filled with emotion, positive emotion, because we were happy.
Ooh, that is beautiful, beautiful. And you say you have another one. If you want to share, we're gonna come back from this break.
Oh, yes,
we want to get all of it. So thank you all for tuning in. If you're like me, I know you're enjoying this interview. Continue to share it, and even when we play the rebroadcast, make sure you share. We'll be right back with more from our sister, Dr. Khalilah T. Muhammad.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Individually, we are poor when you compare us with white society in America. We are poor. Collectively, we are richer than all the nations in the world, with the exception of 9. That's power right there, if we know how to prove it. We begin the process of building a greater economic base, and at the same time, we are putting pressure where it really hurts. We don't have to argue with anybody. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country. Say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda bad treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you are not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. We mean business now, and we are determined to gain our rightful place in God's world.
AsiaticMinds.com. Online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. 2022 through 23 enrollment waiting list open now. Visit AsiaticMinds.com.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NMV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Minister Muhammad with NMVnews.com.
And we're back, brothers and sisters. And so before we get into this next question, I want to give our guest the opportunity to share that other testimony she had.
Oh, I was just going to share that I recall one time, this is in the area of serving, and to kind of connect to, I believe, something you asked me earlier, but I was about to graduate with my PhD, and I was speaking to one of the minister's daughters because I wanted to invite the minister and Mother Khadijah to my graduation. And I was coming to serve, and I'd written a letter, and I was planning to make sure he received the letter through Sister Amina. And so after the dinner was served, and I'm standing there in a hairnet with a chef jacket on, working with Sister Mary Alice and the rest of the sisters. One of his daughters, Sister Donna, hits the spoon on the glass and says she has an announcement. So at this point, I'm still kind of doing my job of clearing the table. And she announces that inshallah I'll be graduating, and that she wanted to make sure that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan knew. So at that point, everything shifts, and the minister, looks at me, and he, asked me briefly about when I was going to graduate and what was it going to be in, and all of that. And I told him that I had written a letter because I wanted to invite him and Mother Khadijah to my graduation. And, just to see that the joy on his face, and the pride that he took in making sure that I had an opportunity to give him more details on that, this particular achievement. And he said, of course, sweetheart, we'll be happy, to be at your graduation. But something else came into play, and Allah is the best knower, so he was not able to be in attendance. But after that, most times when I see him, he says, "Is that my doctor?" So for me to know that, he claims me, although we know how we feel about the enemy's education, but he acknowledges, my pursuit is something that I just wanted to share as well.
And that's a beautiful point, because some people hear our critique of the school, the educational system, and sometimes they walk away thinking that we are anti-education. But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad wasn't anti-education. He was anti-education that was void of knowledge itself, that made us into white folks. But he definitely wanted, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, as he refers to you as, that's my doctor, to get educated. And while we're talking about that, over the last decade, we have witnessed an increased members of the Nation of Islam to become published authors, right? And on various topics on theology, family, relationships, children books, and more. I haven't seen, that increase in literary works, right? Yes. That are like fictional, but kind of based in a historical content. Yes. What do you think we can do as a nation to encourage the writers in our nation to begin to start producing our own literary writings?
Well, one point that comes to mind is, I think it's important to search out what guidance the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave the minister in this area, because there's something significant about why this area is an area that we consider to be an omission. And I don't think that that's something by accident. It may very well connect to, and I'm just leaning on my own understanding, which if I need to be corrected by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan or whoever, I will receive that. But I think it also lends itself to the significance of our minds. And we have to be careful on what we allow to feed our minds. That's of a fiction realm.
Great point.
And in terms of what you mentioned in our earlier conversation that I don't know if everyone was privy to, but just that piece about Will Smith. you know, and we have to be careful what we lend our minds over to. You know, because as the minister said in the Swan Song, even with sin, when you incline to a thing, Allah is going to leave you there. You know, so we have to be mindful even in how we take on, you know, fiction. Not, you know, we have a lot of nonfiction, so to speak, because we have biographies, we have bearings of witness. But I think the literary realm is something we might need to seek guidance from the minister on, as it was that he spoke about the play, you know, and what the danger in when we role play. So I think perhaps the omission is on time because it's not time yet for us to, you know, we don't have enough of the enemy out of us to be able to create things that are going to reflect what our people need, perhaps. I don't know. In addition to that, I would like to lift, you know, my sister here in Chicago, Sister Margaret Mokhti.
Yes.
And she's the artistic director of Mokhti Theater Company. And she did release Bronzeville the Musical that was featured at the Chicago Theater downtown. And it was also featured, if I remember correctly, during Savior's Day. And I do know that when that musical was featured, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was in attendance and the family. So perhaps she's someone that we could further inspire and encourage to not only develop a new piece, but to also receive some mentorship or guidance from her. Because, you know, clearly if the minister was in attendance, he, you know, is in support of her type of artistic reflection of the teachings. So that would be what I would have to answer that question. And, you know, I think that we want to always be in sync with the minister. So if it's something that he hasn't pushed or given as much guidance on how to, then it is with reason that is not something we're flourishing in just yet.
Maybe when you have the opportunity, you'll be able to pose that question to him to find out, right?
Oh yes, sir. Inshallah.
And inshallah, if you can help me get this interview with Sister Margaret Mokhti as well, if that's the one you can add on the list as well, if you can actually do it. That's another one. So I've heard you say on a previous interview that you teach an African American literature class. And my question I want to ask you, how has the teachings of the Mozambique Elijah Muhammad help you with your instruction and even just engaging the students with the literature and with using what you know from the teachings?
Well, you know, one aspect that comes to mind that has helped, I'm recalling having a conversation with my aunt one day when I was driving into work, and I was talking about the frustration sometimes of teaching. And, you know, she and I were just kind of going back and forth about what was frustrating and what was I experiencing. But then as we were talking, you know, we began to talk about Master Fard Muhammad's love for us, you know, that he would travel 9,000 miles to save one, right? So, you know, I would have to say that it is the teachings that is my foundation and that undergirds everything that I do in the area of instruction. You know, and I have to meditate on and reflect on the teachings to help me, to help my people. You know, I teach at one of the community colleges here in Chicago where the population is mostly Black and Hispanic. So I'm teaching my people, you know, and so having said that, I'm able to utilize some of what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has offered to us in professional development and in other lectures where he speaks on the importance of education. And that is really to help my people to see themselves in what it is that they're learning and to connect it to real life. So in order to do that, that's just basically giving them Islam, you know, and not necessarily saying, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said this or the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that, you know, but it's just it's lifting up the teachings and knowing that one day they will become registered Muslims of the Nation of Islam, and they will be able to remember or feel from my spirit, my teacher's spirit, which is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Wow, beautiful response, beautiful response. And we're coming to the closing of this dynamic interview, sister. This is one for the history books and one of our great ones. So my last question I want to ask, Is there anything you would like to share that you did not have the opportunity to share during the interview?
Well, first I want to say this. You know, I want to acknowledge that I'm forever grateful for my parents. And both of my parents have transitioned. Both of them have been gone for more than half of my life. But, you know, as I'm growing and maturing in Islam and in myself, I can't help but be grateful for the seed that they planted, you know, and for the gift of the teachings, you know, and particularly my father, because he's the one who took me to Madison Square Garden to hear the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He's the one that would pick me up from school. And sometimes he wouldn't talk. He would just play cassette tape. And so he was giving me and guiding me in a direction that I'm grateful to Allah that I had the same mind enough to follow and pick up for myself. So I just would like to acknowledge that, my gratitude for my parents. And I also would like to express my gratitude for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I want to acknowledge how grateful I am for every private and public moment that I've ever experienced with him, because if it wasn't for that, I would have nothing to bear witness to. And I want to thank him for the teachings, because in the teachings, you know, you got to have a test in order to have a testimony. So it is in the teachings that we find solutions, and we find strength, and we find the ability to rise above different tests and trials that we have in our life. And I believe that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the quintessential example of inspiration, of being tested and tried and still rising through it all. So I just personally would like to thank him very much for all that he has done for me and is doing for me, so that I would have an opportunity to speak or even have something to say on your show today. I would also like to thank our National MGT and GCC Captain, Sister Naima Muhammad, and our Supreme Captain, Brother Mustafa Farrakhan, for all of their hard work for the MGT and FOI classes, for their leadership, their love, and their vision, because it inspires me every day. And I would also like to just acknowledge that I'm just very proud to be a member and a citizen of the Nation of Islam, and a member of the best class on the planet Earth, which is the MGT and GCC. And I thank Allah very much for it all. And I would also like to thank my husband.
Praise, yeah, definitely. Give him a shout out and give him our greetings as well, and thank him for well too. But thank you, sis, for what you shared. Very beautiful. You see in the comments, people are loving it. We like everybody that we thank everybody that tuned in. We were not able to stream on YouTube, but we're going to upload the actual video to YouTube, and I'll make sure that we post a link and you'll get it. But thank you, sister. May Allah continue to bless you, and keep whatever referrals you have. I'm open to it.
Oh, yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.